Welcome to our Container Security Weekly Group Discussion. In the past, this call has been focused primarily on planning breakdown. We are sort of increasing the scope of the agenda to include whatever synchronous conversations should happen at the group level, namely demos. So as there is work that we want to demo to our PM, this is a good opportunity to do that. What we'd like to do, rather than spending a lot of time watching synchronous demos, is have people record them in advance. I realize just now I don't have this on this agenda, but I had it on the one prior to this, so I'll move it over. So it's really helpful to record demos in advance, share them in Slack, but then also here on this agenda so people can watch them ahead of time, and this can be a good opportunity for people to ask questions, clarify anything, good discussion based on that demo. In addition to demos, planning breakdown, as we've been doing for the last month or so now, I want to say. So that being said, we didn't have any follow-up from previous discussions. Does anyone have anything to demo? If you don't have a recorded demo, we will still allow you to share here. Some demo is better than no demo. Anyone? All right, planning breakdown. So Sam has provided us with issues in advance to review. Sam, I'm gonna go ahead and pull these up one at a time, and I'll let you talk.
Okay, and these log ones are definitely the priority to talk about today. So if we don't have time to get to the last one, it's okay. But if we do, we can talk about that too. So just to dive into these log ones, both of them, they're very similar. So that's why I kind of want them together, at least in discussion, because they'll share the same place in the UI. I know we've talked about it before. Things have progressed on both of these issues since we last discussed in this group meeting. So just to update everyone, if you haven't followed the thread or the notes there, I had a discussion with our internal GitLab security team and verified that the requirements here will in fact meet their needs. We also have a couple additional customer calls upcoming, although I would not like to wait on those to move forward. You know, just having at least the GitLab security team verify that we're headed in the right direction is good enough for now. And if we need to iterate or make changes down the road, either in these issues or with new issues, we can do that. So again, just the quick overview here is we're adding a page to the GitLab settings integration page. And so you'll have one single place where you'll be able to configure your integration with your SIEM product. Now I use the term SIEM. It doesn't have to be sent to a SIEM. It can optionally be sent to a central logging solution, which is then, you know, acts as an intermediary, which then gets forwarded onto the SIEM later on. Just for ease of terminology and to avoid having a super long name, we're just calling the whole integration SIEM. So it's actually relatively straightforward. You just put in an IP address or a host name, your port, and either TCP or UDP, and then there's two checkboxes down there, one to turn on and off mod security logs going to that IP address, and one to turn on and off Cilium logs. Now, obviously, we have two separate issues for each of those checkboxes because I'm assuming that the effort between those is going to be somewhat separate, and we can release each of those independently. They don't have to go together. These logs will be sent from the Kubernetes cluster directly to the IP address configured there. So they do not have to be proxied through the GitLab server. They can just be sent right away. Also, they'll be sent in syslog over syslog protocol and in JSON format. So with all of that being said, that's really kind of the overview of what we're going for here. The ultimate purpose behind all of this, you know, I sort of started with the solution rather than the problem, but the problem being solved with all of this is just to give the customer some visibility into their logs without having to SSH into the container or to pull them up more manually. You know, the assumption here is that most customers already have some sort of central logging solution or SIEM in place, and we can just send it over there, and that's kind of a normal place in their workflow to review the logs. It's not a perfect solution, but it's one that will at least be a first start or an MVC that can prove value to the customer and prove value to us, and we can iterate from there. So with that being said, any questions about the problem to be solved or the requirements for the solution.
Just a reminder of the goal of planning. Sorry, Zamir, just a reminder of the goal of planning breakdown. We don't want to seep into grooming here. So, and I don't want to cut you off, Zamir. I want to hear your question about making sure we understand the requirements, the boundaries, and the solution validation. Go ahead, Zamir.
For me, it's just a question regarding the IP. Do we support both IPv4 and IPv6? Or I don't know about the other place in GitLab.
It's a good question. I didn't specify in the requirements. If we can support both, that's great. But if it's going to be additional scope, if you guys are recommending descoping that to just IPv4, then that would be okay for this initial first pass.
Okay.
What are the requirements questions does everybody have?
So I have a lot of concerns about this approach, but it's very similar to the other one we've had about a global WAF toggle in terms of if the requirement is that we have to push logs into a SIEM, then we are essentially still running into the issue of like trying to push a config from the GitLab side to the cluster side to the SIEM. And this could potentially conflict significantly with supporting something like WAF statistics. So we would have a separate implementation of how we're fetching logs from how we're actually pulling stats. Namely, if we're pushing to some SIEM, then we can't pull from that same SIEM. So we're either choosing special log export or WAF statistics. So I guess the question is, are we solving one problem here, or are we trying to create like a unified experience for our network stats and our WAF? This seems like a very specific problem we're solving rather than like a product that we're building. Is that a concern?
So it sounds like your question partially delves into like how it's implemented on the back end in a lot of ways, if I understand it right. I mean, customers want to view their logs in the SIEM. I view that as somewhat separate from things like WAF statistics or even container network security statistics. Both should be able to work regardless of whether I have the SIEM enabled or not, and enabling the SIEM shouldn't shut down my WAF statistics. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Maybe you can clarify it a little bit for me.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just kind of, I'm thinking about this as I'm talking. So if it's unclear, that's entirely on me. But I guess to support something like WAF statistics alongside WAF logs through this approach, we would essentially be deploying an Elasticsearch cluster or Elasticsearch instance within their cluster, as well as pushing out to some third-party SIEM. And I guess I'm just seeing if we're all on the same page that is the direction we would be going with this approach.
Yes, the logs will be, I mean, the end vision is for logs to be sent to multiple places, if that's what you're asking. The answer is yes, we do want to be able to send logs to multiple places. Down the road, we do still want to surface the logs in GitLab, which would be duplicative and seemingly a little bit redundant, and lets you understand that, you know, the SIEM is taking in logs not just from these products, but from a whole host of other things as well. So there is value independently in having it in the SIEM, and there's also separate value in having it in GitLab. The value for having it in the SIEM is it's easy to be correlated with all of the other logs that are coming in, and the SIEM can find things that we can't find in GitLab because we don't have access to those other logs. The benefit of having the logs in GitLab is it's right there in one product. So if you're trying to tune rules in GitLab, you can go look at the logs in GitLab. It's just all one place to manage it. So you're not having to bounce back and forth between your SIEM and GitLab just to test a rule or to set it up. So in the end, we definitely do want to support the ability to send this information, take this information and farm it out to multiple end locations.
And so that's going to create more questions for Lucas based on how he's rubbing his beard, or if that cleared things up.
I understand the intent. I just, this is, I guess, the part where it gets difficult, which is I'm not sure how to proceed to a planning breakdown stage where I have an understanding of what we want to do as a product direction, but I feel like there's a big gap between how things are currently implemented and getting there. So without getting like too deep into the sticks, I guess I need like a sanity check from like Zamir or someone who's looking at this and whether this seems ready for planning breakdown. Like I'm not quite sure how this fits into something like the cluster management approach we'd be going with, where we have a UI driven solution to configure cluster projects deployed through infrastructure as code.
I'm not there yet for this one as well. I don't know how that would fit. I would have to dig first before I can start thinking about helping you, Lucas.
Yeah, so maybe that's fine. If we were moving to, if this is the way the processes should work, then maybe that is a part of planning breakdown, but I would consider it to be still a part of solution validation, just taking into account the engineering constraints. So yes, I would say it's not complete.
So it sounds like we need engineering's involvement in the solution validation, because Sam has done the piece that he believes is correct and moving forward, but we need to come back with some more research within the engineering team. Does that sound right? Okay, Zamir, I'm looking at you, man. Are you, I know Arthur's out right now and you've got a lot on your plate. Are you willing to take on some of this over the course of the next? I mean, this is something that we want to have in for 12/10, so it's a fairly tight time frame for what seems like a pretty large effort. Lucas, can Zamir and you work together on that?
Yeah, I can look into that for sure.
With some assistance from Lucas? It feels complicated enough to need someone to discuss this with. And without having Arthur here, I don't want to just say, good luck, Zamir.
Yeah, I'm happy to help. I don't have much capacity right now, but if need be, sure.
Okay, so Zamir, I think what I would like to do is take one of these two issues, and I think Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, it should probably be the WAF logs, because this is where we're more sort of deeply entrenched right now, and have Zamir, assign this to Zamir to do some more research and dig into this solution a bit more and make sure that we understand how this impacts our work and the direction that this is taking us.
Yeah, that sounds great. I don't have a strong preference on which one you start with, especially since, at least from my perspective, it seems like there's going to be enough of an overlap between the two where, you know, working on the one is also going to get some forward progress on the other, even if it's not quite deliverable yet. So yeah, if you would prefer to start on WAF logs, that's great.
Zamir, do you have a preference?
I think WAF log would be a quicker way to go.
Okay. So then I don't know if based on these concerns, it makes sense to start talking about the front end work, given that I know part of what Lucas is talking about is putting the UI on this and how we give the customers the opportunity to configure this. I do want to call out that this is sort of outside of our normal work boundary, right? So we'd be working in the configure stage to add this screen. Am I correct on that? So it would make sense if this is the direction that we're going to have someone from the front end team. And I do see both Alexander and Savas here who just started like last week. So I don't know if it's fair to have them start digging around into the configure stages, but it'd be good for us to at least start looking at that part of the application, you know, what it would take to add another view here off of this configuration page. So I think I want to get the solution validation done first. I think that falls more into grooming. So for now, we'll assign this one to Zamir. We'll wait on any of that front end investigation until we have some more confirmation that this is the direction that we're taking. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay. So I think that covers all of this right here, right? Because like you said, Sam, these two issues are fairly parallel to each other. I mean, the requirements and the solution are very similar to each other. So is there any more discussion around this for right now? I know there's lots, but. Okay. So Sam, you had a couple of other items down here.
Yep. So I added one just barely too as a note. So we are looking to deprioritize the environment level WAF toggle items. So I know, Zamir, those are currently assigned to you for grooming. I think I'm going to push those out just into the general backlog and reevaluate later if we pick those back up. So hopefully that at least helps take one thing off your plate. Not that it's huge, but one less thing to look at.
Yeah,
And
that
then,
really helps.
And then the next one, so just to start talking about, this one's not in, what's the right stage? This one's not in planning breakdown yet, but it's also not scheduled for 1210. This is one we're looking at more for 13.0. And just wanted to start the discussion here. I know we hastily started it at the end of a meeting a few weeks ago. Just wanted to pick this back up and talk about, get an early engineer's perspective on how do we break this down, what are we looking at as part of this? Essentially, this is a duplicate of the WAF toggle work that you've been doing, Zamir, although it's for Cilium, bringing a way to turn it on and off in the UI and switch it between logging and blocking in the UI. Are there any comments or feedback from engineering? This is still early. It's still in the design state. We're trying to still figure out what this looks like and where it goes in the UI, but just wanted to open the door to any comments or feedback that you guys may have on this issue. So let me ask a different question then. Zamir, the approach that you've taken to turn the WAF on and off seems to be working, and it's managed to overcome some of the other technical obstacles that we were running into initially. Do you foresee that this is something you're going to be able to handle in the same way by pushing out updates to the home chart, or are there other considerations here?
So right now we have a couple of, for example, the configuration file for mod security. It's our code base, so we can play a little bit more with that. For seeding right now, we just triggered the Helm installation and we don't have much stuff on our side. It's basically just using the infrastructure from the orchestration team. It wouldn't be as trivial, so I would have to look into that a bit more for that.
Okay. Well, it would be great if, it sounds like there's not a lot of thoughts or comments on this right away, and that's okay. If you guys do have a chance to look at it and put in your thoughts later on or throughout the course of the next week, that'd be great. I'm guessing we want to split this out in the same 4 sections, but, also would like to get feedback on that as well.
All right, well, we've made
And
it
I'm
through
just
our
looking
agenda
at
today, so that's amazing. Good job.
Sam, I saw in the issue that you said that the UI is still in works and you're looking for a place to put this. And a lot of that was like global level disable Cilium. Is there currently a location for global level security scan or like container scanning things?
So for container scanning, I believe they do have something on that security and compliance page. So we do have like a space in the UI that we're starting to build out. Not everything necessarily makes sense to go there, like the SIM integration. You know, we've got a dedicated integrations page, and so it kind of falls, you know, outside the scope of that page. So, you know, we still need to figure out, you know, where does this live? Also, I was reading Wayne's point in the agenda. I can vocalize it since I don't think he's on right now. You know, he says, I believe that Cilium will be different from WAF in terms of the configuration of logging and blocking overall. Cilium logs and blocks based on the customer's network policy, in contrast, WAF logs and blocks based on the OWASP rule set. He does not believe we need logging and blocking configuration of Cilium in the GitLab UI, but he does believe we need enable and disable in the GitLab UI. That certainly may be possible. So, you know, that's another good point of feedback, that maybe this is just an on-off switch and we don't switch between logging and blocking. I would say in an ideal world, maybe it's not easy to add that toggle from engineering, but it would be nice to override your individual settings with a global switch to say, actually, you know, even though I've got these policies in place, I actually want it to ignore that and just do logging anyway. But that may be something beyond the scope of our initial cut, you know, something we can just forego for now and get customer feedback on and see if we need to add it in later once we've got, you know, more users in it. So maybe this is just enabling it and disabling it in the UI. I don't know, but we would overall like to add more UI to these things. You know, even though we've got infrastructure as code, if we've got UI that fronts that, it just makes it a whole lot easier to discover and find and use by the end users. And if they want to delve into the code, that way they can. The infrastructure part makes it easy to copy projects over or to preserve your settings from thing to thing. But the flip side is, you know, we need it to be simple enough for somebody coming in new to be able to just pick it up and run with it.
So I would add to that. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I have a general question about that. Right now, our orchestration team has something called cluster management apps. That's in the beta phase, I think. It's basically, they're moving away from the UI, from having the apps in the UI, and using this centralized repository that can install and uninstall applications as they go. So for example, that's how Celio has been built, different than WAF. WAF was built embedded inside GitLab repository. When you say that we want to have more UI, what rings in my mind is that should it synchronize somehow with orchestration team? Because maybe they're moving in one direction and we are going kind of in another way. Have you considered something like that? Have you been in touch with the POs from the orchestration team?
I don't think I have. I know there's another issue going around where we're looking at a more consolidated way to have UI that ends up pushing commits into files like across all of Secure and Defend, just because they have the same problem that we do, and you know, potentially looking at breaking out the Secure and Defend pieces of the code from everything else, because I know some files get really large and long. I'm not really aware. If you have an issue to send me, I'll be happy to take a look at it for what the orchestration team's working on. That would be great.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way. When we start doing the Cilium integration, I start adding code into GitLab MR, and then I had MR for that. And then the guys from the orchestration team, and they came and they kind of show us the way for going forward with that. So that's why I'm bringing this up, because it's not, I know it's not straightforward to consider that.
And this is something, so I don't know if I ever posted that recording of the GitLab Managed Apps 1 versus V2, but I'll try and post that in the channel because that's really, really important for this discussion. And the issue I linked here just now was syncing UI to cluster management project. That's the planned direction for configure to go, which is essentially you change a configuration within the UI. It would add like a enabled true to a CI file, and that controls the Helm chart generation. But that's really important here because as Samir said, there is no UI at all for Cilium right now. So we would have to build an entire UI that's going to sync to the cluster management project as a prerequisite to having toggles for this one. That wasn't really something that was raised here because there's other problems to solve already with that, but there's quite a few prerequisites to get there.
Thank you.
And that I think the current direction is very similar to the way the security products work, where you essentially have the cluster management project will upload a report that has a list of the configuration and the applications. And so we'll have something in the database that we can reference to check what the current deployed configuration is. But that's read only, it's not write.
Got it. Well, thanks for posting that issue. I'll see if I can tie off with the orchestration team and see if we can make sure we're working together instead of against each other.
And I can say that if we figure this out with them, it's going to be it's going to clear the path for us to do the environmental changes for WAF as well. Because the structure is going to be similar. It's going to be to interact with the pipelines and the environment for each project.
Awesome. Well, that's all I had today. Thanks for all the great participation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'll share this video recording both in this agenda and in the Slack channel. So have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.